Hello and welcome to another From the Workshop. I am your host, Brandon Hart, and we are here once again in the phenomenal nerd lair at NimbleLink. This time, I want to talk to you about something, and it's right here. So now you know. We're going to talk about the idea of designing a Skywire socket into a PCB that is completely universal. But wait, you might be saying, Brandon, haven't you always talked about how Skywire modems you can design a board once and put any Skywire modem in that socket? Yes, I have, and this is exactly what we're going to cover. Some of the modems, as you might imagine, we've got a large Skywire modem family at this point. Some of the modems have some very special features. Some of them have some differences. Some of them have some things that really kind of have to be treated special because of the functionality of those particular modems. So we've had to utilize some of the pins to kind of accommodate some of those specialnesses of the modems, those unique aspects. So this is basically going to kind of cover what you can do if you want to just have a single board design. Any modem, past, present, probably into the future, will be compatible with that particular socket. It's kind of the desire of everybody to have that in mind, so we're going to cover that right now. So the first thing is you have to understand, you have to recognize that if you want a truly fully universal design that works on anything from the super high speed Cat 4 to the super low speed M1, let me try that again, from the super high speed Cat 4 to the super low speed M1, you're going to have some sacrifices. The super high speed Cat 4 stuff is really intended to operate over USB, for instance, and operate at a higher power state and things like that. The M1 and some of the lower power stuff is intended to operate much more slowly. It has specific features that enable some of those low power features and capabilities. So if you make something that is going to work across the entire product family, you're not really going to be able to tie into the specific extra functions and features that some of them may have. That needs to be understood going into this. Okay, with that understanding out of the way, really, if you want to get the best functionality, the best trade-off of functionality and flexibility, maybe don't make it universal for the entire product family, but maybe make it universal for 2 or 3. Then really deep dive and look into the data sheets for those individual modems and figure out what the best combination, the best trade-off, the best compromise of the additional functionality, again, they'll all have standard core functionality, might be. So that's one idea. If you don't necessarily need the full range of Skywire modems, a subset will do. Then you can really deep dive and make it more flexible, more universal in terms of that specific range. So you want all Cat 3s and all Cat 4s to work in that socket, in that board design, dive into those. Can't emphasize enough, read the data sheets. You're going to hear me say that a couple more times. But the data sheets really spell all of this out. We're going to do a real high-level overview of design considerations for making a universal Skywire modem socket. We just, in a previous video, talked about power and power requirements and power design considerations. So I would be remiss if I did not mention the need to design the appropriate power supply for, again, all of the modems. This happens to apply to every single modem in the product family. So for more information on power, head on over here to this link up here on the screen. You can click it and it'll get you there. Cool. So you've watched that video and now you're back. Excellent. Well done. So the next thing we're going to talk about here are to remember that some of the pins in the Skywire modem socket design, that 20-pin design, some of those pins are going to require inputs that are 1.2 volts, maybe 1.8 volts, depending upon what type of input or output it is. Maybe it's just a GPIO or a DIO. And so that's something to keep in mind. Again, read the data sheets and you'll be able to determine that for your specific modem. The nice thing though is that the pins will all be in the same place where there is a relevant IO requirement. So just something to keep in mind. The software may need to be a little bit different, or the connections may need to be slightly different in terms of how they're wired up, but the functionality of that pin will remain the same across the entire Skywire modem product family. Some examples of that too, in terms of not just voltage necessarily, but behavior, is pin 20. The on-off pin is a lot of times used to essentially signal the modem to turn on. Just because you give it power doesn't mean it's on. You actually have to tell it to turn on with the on-off pin, pin 20. In some modems, you toggle it. Some modems, you hold it down and then go back low again. Some modems, you just have to hold it low the entire time and in order for it to be on. The best way to make something completely universal and not have to worry about how to toggle that pin, even in your host controller, would just be to simply tie it to ground. In that case, it's always on. So you can see where that's a sacrifice on the low power side. The modem is always on and always ready to send data and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, again, those pins are going to be in the same spot. All right. So let's actually show you what I'm talking about when I say the pins are going to be in the same spot. So right up here is a graphic that we created just today, trying to figure out kind of the least common denominator in terms of what is required to get cellular radio functionality from any Skywire modem in the whole product family. We then color coded this diagram here. So you can see those that are green are completely universal, meaning no matter which modem you put in, that pin will be in that spot. It will work in generally the same way, and generally should also probably be connected. If you only connect the green pins, with one exception, and that is the DTR pin, if you only connect the green pins and then pull DTR to ground, your modem is going to work. No matter which modem you put in, it's going to work. You're going to be fine. The other pins are essentially optional, depending upon what kind of functionality either the individual modem has or the functionality that you want to use. So those are, again, optional. The blue ones on the diagram here, the blue ones have some variability. And you'll notice that USB is one of those. The only reason USB has some variability is because USB is not present in the Cat M1 Skywire modem. So that is variable. That is a difference between all the rest of them. So if M1 is not really a concern for you, then USB is also universal. It really just has that one exception. So you don't have to use USB, but again, on the higher bandwidth side, the higher speed end of the Skywire modem family, you're really going to want to use USB for that. So that's why it's kind of an optional pin out. You don't have to have it. We really do recommend UART is connected every single time to every single design because it's a good backup. Even if you want to use USB, UART is always there. It is always on the same pins throughout the entire product family. So it's always good to have that fallback option. The other thing I'll say about USB is that is what is used for flashing the firmware on all of our modems. They all get flashed over USB. So even if you don't plan to connect USB directly to your processor and give a data interface for communicating over the cellular network over USB. You still want to bring that out, maybe put a connector, a USB connector somewhere on your board, because you can then use that for flashing firmware or updating firmware on the Skywire modem. So it could be pretty handy to have that brought out. The last set of pins here are the red pins, and those red pins are general pins. They are kind of miscellaneous pins. Generally speaking, those are your I/O pins and your ADC. However, they change often. So in some cases, they are simply user configurable I/O. In the case of the M1 Skywire modem, those are actually your serial pins, your RX and TX pins for the GPS radio, which is separate from the main Skywire UART. The other one is generally the ADC, but in some cases it's used for other functions, like a ring indicator, for example, on the AT&T Cat 1. So those tend to change fairly frequently. Again, if you want something that's universal, maybe don't connect those pins. Maybe don't use those extra features that are enabled on those pins at times. That's going to depend upon your use case and what you want to get out of having this fully flexible, fully universal Skywire modem socket. I'm going to say it one more time. Read the data sheets. If you know which modems, which technologies, which existing modems you want to accommodate, make sure you read the data sheets, look at the pinouts. You can see the differences in the individual modems and what they're connected to. But that graphic that we showed up, we'll flash up one more time. That graphic really kind of gives you an indicator of, across the entire Skywire modem product family, which pins are universal. Those green pins, always going to be in the same spots. You can always depend upon them being there. And connecting those and nothing else will give you all the functionality that you need, with that one exception: pull DTR to ground. That's a blue pin here. But otherwise, just the green pins will do you just fine. Cool. If all of that sounds confusing, if all of that sounds scary, if all of that sounds like something you don't really want to deal with or have the confidence to do, it may seem like an obvious suggestion, but maybe hire an engineer who can work through all of this. We're happy to work with customers who are having issues. If you get kind of into this and you're not really sure whether you're doing something right, or you think you got it right but aren't really sure, email us, product.support@nimblelink.com. We'll take a look at your design and see if there's any suggestions we can make. So that might be a good idea as well. The other thing to bear in mind is, even if your board is fully connected up and only using the green pins, and so therefore fully universal, LTE alone around the world is deployed across, I don't forget what the number is right now, but it's 40 some different bands. And there were just more auctions for, I think, 600 megahertz and other frequencies which have never been used before as well now. So there's going to be even more. So the things to bear in mind is that just because your board design is universal, the antennas that you connect to it may not be. So if they're SMA connections, or you're plugging directly into the UFL connector on the Skywire modem, those may still need to change from modem to modem to accommodate the frequencies and the bands that are used for the specific deployment that you're going for. So when you swap out the Skywire modem, you might need to swap out the antennas too. Just bear that in mind. Speaking of things that might have to change as you switch modems, we've really kind of talked about the hardware up to this point. There is a software aspect to this. In addition to the way some of the pins are triggered on the existing pins that are always the same, there is also the AT commands that you are sending in to the modem. Those AT commands generally are going to be proprietary for the module that is used in each one of the modems for that particular technology. So there will be some software work required, even if your hardware is designed to be fully universal. So bear that in mind. When you move from one to another, either your device needs to auto detect, and it can do that by just simply asking the modem, what is your module manufacturer name and model number, and then changing the AT commands that are issued to that modem based upon the response, or simply loading in, flashing, your device firmware to use the appropriate AT commands for whatever modem you just stuck in. But the AT commands will change. The Hayes AT commands are intended to be kind of universal and available on all the modems, but we have seen in the implementations of those commands that sometimes, while the command itself is universal, the way in which the modem responds may not be. So sometimes the date code will come back in a different format. Sometimes the signal strength, for instance, is calculated slightly differently. So the Hayes AT commands are great. They're a good starting point. They'll certainly get you a lot closer to having a universal set of AT commands, but don't plan on them being 100% universal. They will still require a little bit of difference in the software to interpret those commands. Okay. That was a lot of info, and I recognize that it was a lot of information. I will just basically tell you one last time. The Skywire modems are highly interchangeable and universal. There are some special commands, some special features of some of the modems and some of the ways in which you might want to implement that design, which will change, specifically kind of at the extremes here. But generally speaking, those pins, the sockets that you put them into, are very universal and can be swapped from one to the next and into the future designs that we don't even have yet. But you do need to read the data sheets. You do need to pay attention to some of the specific pins. We'll flash up the graphic here one more time. Again, pay specific attention and special attention to all of the pins that are not green on this diagram, and then you'll probably be just fine. We're here to help. If you have any issues, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns as you get into it, and would love to help you get a product to market that is future-proofed into infinity and beyond. I think that might be trademarked. But until next time, thank you very much for your attention. Please do like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and to this video. Leave any comments you can down in the comments section, and shoot us any thoughts you have, any questions or suggestions for future topics, anything you'd like to see, to the email address here, workshop@nimblelink.com. And until next time, thank you very much and have fun building.